22 candidates. I'm Lori Pesta, the chairman of the vetting committee, and I'll let everyone introduce themselves around the table. And we'll start over here with Bill.
Bill Durrell.
Trenton Adams.
Jack Staver.
Harry Abrams.
Jeff Duncan.
And Jeff Duncan is our candidate today for House District 22. And he's in the process of signing the video disclosure. You hand that back, and then you can keep that little folder. Thank you so much. We appreciate your participation. We appreciate your participation and accepting the invitation.
Sure.
And the video will be utilized on the CCRP website, and while we do everything to prevent anyone from obtaining the video without proper use and request, there's always numerous ways of the video to be obtained regardless of our best attempts to secure it. The video process is meant to allow members of the party and the community to be able to understand the positions, views, and beliefs of the issues and questions held by those who wish to be elected as representatives of the people. And that's basically the reason we do the video, because this is what we would call a people job interview, so to speak.
Right, great idea.
As we will go around the table, we have several questions to ask, and we will start the questions. And Bill, you will start the questions, and are we all set up?
Can I ask real quick, how many questions do we have total?
About 34.
And when would we,
This
do
is,
we have a cutoff time, or?
we plan on an hour interview,
Okay,
depending on how you answer the questions and so on.
sure, I can make it 2 hours, you know me.
That's why I'm mentioning that.
I'm working at it.
Are you in the center here, so I want to make sure you're in the
I don't
view.
know, am I?
I'll scoot it
I
around.
think we'll just scoot that over a little bit.
There we go.
Yeah, I can't see that correctly.
Okay,
I think I see it.
Okay, Bill, would you like to start with the first question?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Welcome again, Jeff. Just for the record, what's your name and your legal residence, and how long have you resided in Cherokee County in the district?
Does this qualify as one of the questions?
This is
Okay, okay. My name is Jeff Duncan. It's actually Jeffrey Scott Duncan. And it's spelled E-R-Y, not R-E-Y, which has been a problem in my life. I've been a resident of Cherokee County since I believe 1987. What was the other question? Where do I live now?
In the
In
district.
Ball Ground, Georgia. I live at 117 Preserve Parkway in Ball Ground, Georgia.
Are you currently a member of the Cherokee County Republican Party, and how do you see your involvement going forward regardless of the outcome of the election?
Yes, I am. Going forward, I don't see it really changing any more than it has been for the last 25 years. I've been chairman of the party for 3 terms, or 2.5 kind of, and I've taken a little bit of a break after our last thing after that many years, but I believe very much in community involvement. That's why I'm doing this. So I expect to be engaged going forward. As to exactly what role, I don't know at this point, but fully engaged.
Please describe 3 pieces of legislation you'd like to see passed in your first term, whether creating law or removing or amending existing law.
There is a particular piece of legislation right now that's in the House, and I think one of our representatives is working on it. There's actually 2, both of them deal with Obamacare defunding. One, I believe, limits the spending of funds at the state level without permission. The other one is actually just blocks it from a constitutional standpoint. And I would be both of those and any other kind of action that we could take legislatively to pull out from under the feet of that piece of legislation that was conceived in dark rooms and by one party would be something I'd be very much of interest in seeing have happen. Then there's some legislation around gun control and actually guaranteeing Second Amendment rights at the state level that I would be very much in favor of seeing. And then anything that we can do from the standpoint of reducing redundancy at the state level. Right now, for instance, the ARC, BRETA, and Department of Transportation all exist, and it's debatable in my mind whether we need all three in the way that they're functioning, and there's a lot of overlap. I know there are. I talked to two of the chairmen on committees that either are impacted by those or that are involved in those committees, and even they tell me that. So I would like to see legislation that addresses lowering the cost. I don't think we have a revenue problem in the state. I think we like nationally, we have an issue of controlling cost.
Harry?
Well, you answered that one. What characteristics and qualities do you believe are important for the State House representative to possess?
I think a level of life experience, I think, is good. My interest in education, my interest in business are both, in terms of the economy here in Cherokee County, but in the state as a whole, both come out of my experience in business. I've worked in small businesses, I've worked in large businesses. I have been senior vice president of one of the largest privately held software companies in the world, as business intelligence director for the southeastern United States. And I've worked for small 2 or 3 man companies over the last 30 years. And so my view is that experience is critical in terms of understanding the challenges confronting small and large business and business opportunity, particularly in our county, and the things that we can do to unencumber and create opportunity for business by limiting regulation and putting in place a tax policy that isn't confiscatory or punitive, but actually facilitates that kind of thing. So that, if you talk about education, homeschooled 5 kids, my wife's an educator, my daughter's an educator, very much my experience in education and raising kids and educating them myself in my home. They also were in private schools, so I've seen that. So that experience, life experience, plays into my understanding of that issue. And if you look at healthcare and what we're doing from a healthcare standpoint with something like the Affordable Care Act or the Unaffordable Care Act, whatever you want to call it, I've had to buy my own personal insurance. I've been on a corporate plan. I've been all around the block on that stuff, and I know right now I'm on a personal individual plan. So I know the challenges and the fear that families experience when they look at premiums that go from $500 a month to maybe $1,500 a month. So I think all that is critical, and competency in dealing with it as well.
Thank you. I'm going to back up one question here. We'll
Yeah.
skip to Everett. What state house committees would you like to serve on?
I think the Small Business Committee, the Economic Development Committee, and the Educational Committee are probably 3 that I'd have a particular interest in.
Okay, Bill, next question.
Sure. Jeff, based on your understanding of the Georgia Constitution, what do you believe the role of the state representative should be?
Primary role is to work with other representatives in proposing and approving a balanced budget for the state of Georgia. Constitutionally, it's the legislature's primary responsibility to make sure that we have a balanced budget and to approve that budget on an annualized basis. Then, of course, there's issues, or statutory issues around local and statewide kind of issues, whether it's taxation or whether it's, all the things that get dealt with, from education to business and economic policy. But the primary role, the primary constitutional responsibility is to make sure that we manage our money properly. We don't spend more than we have, and I wish that were a policy that we had to enforce at the federal level, but right now we can still print money, so it's kind of tough.
Great, thank you.
What is your position on the bills that have been going through the House to make certain offices such as sheriff, district attorney, county commissioners, court clerk, nonpartisan elections?
That's a great question. It's one I've I've had a lot of discussion about at home with my wife and with party members. I think that, I'll just say this, when you have elected officials who are in a role where they have to deal with legislation, public policy, it's naturally a political kind of role. And I think that partisan and party affiliation is both natural and right. When you have a role that, for instance, a sheriff, I begin to become concerned about roles where you politicize a position that doesn't necessarily have or shouldn't have a political kind of aspect to it. So I would be open to, in some cases, limiting party affiliation where it's a non-political position and we don't want politics involved. In areas where public policy and voter accountability from a representation standpoint plays in, it absolutely should be a partisan position, in my opinion.
What's your position on term limits?
I think the greatest term limit, Jack, is the voter getting sick of not being represented and sending somebody into office and then having the story change so dramatically from the campaign to the practice of legislating or representing that they don't recognize who they are. And that's part of the reason I'm running. I think that we've had a great delegation, in my opinion, for years here in Cherokee County, but that hasn't been the case across the spectrum, certainly not nationally. So I think that to answer your question, I think that it's I'm sorry, the question?
Term limits.
Term limits. The issue of term limits has come up because people feel very disenfranchised. They feel very underrepresented. In fact, they don't feel forgot about. And it seems like the concerns of everything from undocumented laborers to, and you can go across the board, those become primary issues for politicians, and somebody wants to raise their hand and say, well, yeah, what about me, the voter? So that's why I'm running. I think term limits, generally speaking, I wouldn't favor a term limit for an elected position. I would rather encourage voter participation and awareness and start to hold politicians accountable for what they claim to do. And that's my preference in terms of having somebody removed from office through the electoral process.
Harry?
I've got a three-parter for you here. First of all, what is the purpose of the Second Amendment? Number two, do you believe that federal gun control laws are constitutional? And number three, does the state have the right to confiscate firearms in an emergency?
I'm going to start at the top. No. And the purpose, I would say, is originally was to be able to bear arms for the protection of the individual citizen and not have to be reliant on the government to protect his or her interests. So I think that the right to bear arms in the Second Amendment and to possess arms is a constitutionally guaranteed right. I support it fully because I happen to support the Constitution and I don't pick and choose or interpret it as a living document. I interpret the Constitution by original intent. I believe the original intent of the Constitution, the Second Amendment in particular, was to allow people to be able to protect themselves. I don't think the problem there is with law-abiding citizens. I think the problem there is with criminals. And if you start punishing or putting in punitive restrictions on constitutional rights for law-abiding citizens, you take care of everything but the problem. Not only that, but you violate their constitutional and civil rights. So that's my position.
Okay, Bill?
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
I won't be redundant, but this one involves constitutional carry. If you just want to restate what your opinion is about that, and then how do you think about the current limitations on carry, such as on campuses and churches?
You know, I understand the concern, but I guess I would say, first of all, I don't see the grounds for limiting it empirically or otherwise. I'm concerned about, if you can create a circumstantial argument on which to take away somebody's constitutional rights here, then what's to keep you from doing it everywhere else? I mean, one violation of my civil rights is a violation of all my civil rights, in my opinion. So I would not favor doing that at all, and in fact, given the lack of any real rational reason to do it, I would support no restrictions on gun carry.
The constitutional carry is really a separate part of that. Do you understand what constitutional carry is?
I believe it did, yes.
Okay.
So you're in favor of constitutional, you don't need a permit, you don't need anything. That's
I'm
what constitutional carry is.
Yeah, I don't believe that, I believe that the right to gun ownership should be unrestricted.
Okay. I just want to clarify.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
The next question, Trevor.
What does the 10th Amendment mean to you, and do you believe that the states have the right to nullify unconstitutional federal laws?
Well, the 10th Amendment, specifically if going back to my public policy days, but I believe that grants to the state all rights not specifically mandated to the federal government, I believe. And so what was the question now?
What does that mean to you, and do you believe the states have the right to nullify unconstitutional?
I believe I appreciate you restating it for me. I had to go back and make sure I had in my mind. I'm not good on the numbers of the amendments as much as I am the content. So I think that the intent was that states' individual sovereignty was recognized, and that it limited the intrusion of the federal government into the lives of citizens. That in fact the states operated in such a way as to hold accountable the potential tyranny of the federal government. So I believe that that particular amendment makes a statement to guarantee or try to ensure that separation. And if a law is unconstitutional, I think absolutely it is therefore the responsibility, not just the privilege of the state, to oppose that law. And that's part of, I think, the role and the intent of the 10th Amendment is to put that check on federal power.
Okay, Jack, next question.
Are there any conditions under which you would advocate either raising existing taxes or implementing new taxes?
No, Jack. I've raised 5 kids, not to go off on the deep end on this, but I pay enough taxes. I think the American people pay enough taxes. It's not just income tax, but when you add sales tax and every other fee and tax, and then when you die, your death tax, and your inheritance tax, I don't think the problem is taxes. So given the circumstances in the foreseeable 100 years, I don't see any need to raise taxes. I see more of we got an $80 billion food stamp program. It's growing astronomically in the last 5 years. I don't see discussion of raising taxes anywhere on the horizon until, like most people, we see responsible management at the federal level and state level, for that matter. So, no.
Okay, Harry, next question.
What is the state of Georgia's role in immigration, securing the border, and amnesty?
Well, I think that the whole issue of immigration is a huge one. I think, to answer the question, get right to the answer, I think that the states, and the state of Georgia in particular, since that's where we live, has a responsibility to communicate with and hold accountable its counterpart at the federal level to guard our borders. I think that the porous border that we're experiencing right now is a threat to our national sovereignty. I think a country that doesn't know who's in its borders and who's voting and who's consuming its services is borderlines on losing its national identity. So I think that governors have a responsibility to apply pressure where they can to manage what they can, but the primary responsibility of controlling borders and securing those borders is one of those few and blessed responsibilities, I think, of the federal government that has fallen to the states. And the states have to deal with it because they have to deal with the economic disaster that it's creating. So I hope I've answered that.
Okay,
Mhm.
Bill?
Thanks, Jeff. You mentioned food stamps. What's your opinion and position on food insecure programs and the drug testing, if you will, for those programs? What's your opinion on that?
Some of the requirements around participation. I think that there is a temporary and limited role of a safety net, but that it should be very limited and it should be very temporary and it should be a safety net, not a way of life. And so I think I'm almost afraid to say that because it's so abused right now. And there's such, we're creating a dependent population and consequently a dependent or a captured constituent base that those politicians, as Alexis Tocqueville once said in 1835, those populations that collaborate with elected officials to raid the public coffers to feed their families lose control of their democracy and it dies. So I think that I think that the current program is way out of control. So I would be majorly in favor of reforming it, not just because it's such an expensive and burdensome thing for the American taxpayer, but because it really is dehumanizing to the participants of it as well, whether they recognize it or not, and it's a threat to the democracy. I mean, you get to a point where you tell somebody, you either vote for me or you lose your phone, your home, your food, and your health care. Guess how they're going to vote? You know, it's not a good situation.
Thank you.
What is your opinion on the Affordable Care Act?
That's probably not appropriate to laugh. I think it's you know it was a move, a power move at the federal level when the Democrats controlled all the decision-making mechanisms, and they threw something together. It's not very well thought out as a piece of legislation. It's been poorly executed because the execution of it wasn't very well thought out, because it was thought of in a dark corridor somewhere and rammed down our throats. I think most Americans are scared to death of it and should be. I just left corporate America and went to a small business where I had to buy my own personal health care. And I was scared to death to make that move, even though it was in my best interest, because I didn't know if I could afford to do it. Thankfully, we worked it out and we found a way to do it, but next year is going to be twice as bad. And I know that. So I'm trying to figure out how to do that. I'm making economic business decisions around a federal program that really does nothing but undermine that liberty and that freedom to make decisions that are in my best interest. So I think that it's all the above, and I think most importantly, it'll take roughly 17.5% to 19% of the American economy, and it'll put it under federal control directly. And there's nothing more precious to people than their health care and their children's lives. And when you, to me it's kind of an emotional thing, but when you enslave a population and you control them to that degree, and I think this is where the Republicans we've failed to articulate, it's not about having 2 cars in your garage and having a BMW and having a big bank account or retirement. It's about your liberty. If you take away your economic freedom, you can't make real choices. And this is probably the largest wholesale grab of American individual liberty and freedom, I think, that's ever been foisted upon the American people.
Thank you.
Yes,
Jack?
When is the government allowed to take actions inconsistent with or against the Constitution?
When is the government allowed to take actions inconsistent with?
Yeah.
I think this is an easy answer, but maybe I'm confused. I don't think it ever is. So I'll just say never and live with that.
That's good. That's good.
Position, Harry?
What is the unemployment rate in your district?
In my district, in my county, Jack?
Here.
Harry, I'm sorry. In my county, Harry, it is about 6.4, 6.5%, I think, right around there. I know in the state it's 8.1%. Cherokee County is lower than the average, I think, which is 6 point, it's lower than areas around it, but it's roughly 6.5% right in that area.
Okay.
Okay, Bill, next question?
Jeff, are you or will you be accepting donations from outside of your district? And if so, how do you think those donations will affect your decision making?
Absolutely, I will. I have family that live outside of my district that love me, despite what they know of me. And my mom and my brother and one of my best friends who's CFO for Blue Cross Blue Shield in Michigan. I've been in his wedding, both his weddings. He lost a wife to cancer, and I was his best man in both his weddings. We've known each other since we were 8 years old. He's contributing to my campaign because he's excited about what I'm doing. They've all been pushing me for years to do it. Until my last child left the home, I wasn't willing to. So I've gotten a lot of support from friends in Cherokee County, within my district, outside my district, within Cherokee County, across the state. And frankly, the company that I left after 15 years, and I resigned, the entire executive team contributed to my campaign. Because they're friends. I've worked with them for 15 years. So they're excited, and I'm thankful for that. How that affects it has no effect whatsoever, except that I'm really grateful. None of them, I can't do anything for any of them, and none of them expect anything, so it just lets me print up more signs and get the word out.
Somewhat of a follow-up question to the previous one. Are you receiving PAC or lobbyist contributions?
I have not received any PAC or lobbyist contributions, no.
Jack?
Please describe the geographic boundaries of your district. How much of your district includes Cherokee County?
Geographic boundaries. Okay, I'm bad at geography, Jack. I'll get lost going home tonight, but I will tell you, I think if you drew a line around it, if you start at like 140, Highway 140, and you go up along 575, and you kind of cut over and go around the top of Ball Ground and back over to our eastern border of Cherokee County, and then you pop out of the county a little bit into Forsyth, which is that, and then you come down the edge of our county border, and you pop out again, cut out a little bit of Fulton County. I didn't make this map, but I'm just telling you what it is. And then it comes back down to 140 and back across. That's pretty much my district. 68% is Cherokee County. The remaining, what is that? 32% is between Fulton and Forsyth, and the larger of those two would be Forsyth.
Thank you. Harry?
You did that one. For solutions to the traffic and other infrastructure issues, do you support the regional approach, such as the Atlanta Regional Commission, or another method of dealing with these issues?
I think that transportation issues cannot be solved looking at them merely from a county perspective, just because I think that roads have a bad habit of crossing out of our county and into other counties and being fed. We have 70% of our population leaves the county to go to work. Up until 2 weeks ago, I drove down to Smyrna. It's a nightmare. I got to work at 9 o'clock, whether I left at 6 or whether I left at 7 or whether I left at 8. So there's a problem. I think that I have concerns about the approach, some of the approaches and lack of sensitivities to local issues that a regional commission like the Atlanta Regional Commission has voiced, but I do believe in a collaborative effort between municipalities and counties so that it's rationalized and thoughtful, but I don't think it should be imposed. I think it needs to be approved at a county by county level.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Bill?
Jeff, what do you think the state's role should be in regards to alternative energy sources and subsidies for those sources?
One of the gentlemen that's on the executive team from a past company that supported me has launched a green company, a solar company. We had this discussion. You know, I don't believe the government has any business in picking winners and losers. I believe in free markets and free people, and I believe that that system best determines what people want, need, and what works. So I would say very little, if any.
Okay, thank you.
There are a number of issues in the agricultural industry facing Georgia, including water use, state and federal regulation compliance, tax reform, immigration reform. What is your plan to address these issues for the agricultural community in Cherokee County?
I think that, and I've had a lot of conversations about this up in my area in particular. District 22 has a lot of rural areas in it. But it's changing pretty dramatically over time. I mean, we've seen, all kinds of changes in Cherokee County, and it's purely rural kind of nature. When I started, and there was one Burger Inn in Woodstock when I first got here. It's now looks like like Times Square when you go through there at night. It's changed dramatically. I think a collaborative approach that involves citizens who have a stake, especially from a farming or from a rural property standpoint, collaborating and really participating and kind of coming up with a long-term plan is how I would approach it. At this point, I wouldn't want to offer really a whole lot more in terms of absolute kind of policy statements beyond a starting point like that, and beginning to kind of formulate both a strategic and tactical approach to dealing with some of those challenges.
Okay, Jack?
I wanted to fund this question, but what's your opinion of the Common Core state standards initiative?
Yeah, and this is just random that we're doing.
Yeah.
So I apologize.
right.
It really is.
No, I understand.
It just popped up.
Common Core, I'm learning a lot about it. And the more you learn, the more you think you know, the less you realize you really know. I mean, it is the whole movement toward a top-down, nationalized set of standards has its parallels to a lot of areas in our lives, I think. Healthcare being another great example. I'm not going to say, I don't believe in outright conspiracy, but I do think that there's a mentality that Washington knows best, and that a centralized approach is best. I think they tried that in the Soviet Union. Last time I looked, it didn't work too good, at least from a command and control economy standpoint. I don't think it works any better in education. And frankly, I think, having raised 5 kids and homeschooled myself, and having participated in private schools, and now with a daughter who's a teacher, and a wife who's a teacher, and a son who's wants to go into teaching, I think that the best combination are parents who participate wholly in their children's education and in the choices their children are making, who are given as many options and freedoms to make choices as possible, and I mean economically, not just in name only, and educators who collaborate with them and are held accountable by local parents. So, no, I wouldn't support a Common Core approach at all.
Harry, next question. Thanks,
What
Jack.
are your most important interests outside of your current work?
My wife.
Good answer.
I know she'll be watching this, so but that's true. That is true. I just haven't gotten a lot of time with her over the past few years with 5 kids, but she and I like to paint. I had a fine arts scholarship at the University of Michigan, or at Wayne State University, and Michigan Scholastics art scholarship. So I won it through drawing and painting. I like watercolor, acrylic, oil, and pencil are my mediums. Pastel for portraits. I love tennis, and honestly, I right now with 5 adult children, my biggest thrill is to get some time hanging out with them. So I have 1 grandchild, which has been an unbelievable experience. People tell you you don't know what it's like till you have one, and I totally concur with that. So that takes up all my time at this point. That's my outside interest.
Thank you.
Jeff, would you work with those across the aisle to pass a budget?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a balanced budget is key. I think collaboration is kind of my style. I've done that all my life. I've negotiated contracts, Lowe's Home Improvement for multi-million-dollar contracts, and I've argued with my son about taking out the garbage, and it's a similar experience. But it requires a collaborative effort. I think the budget and balancing the budget in the state of Georgia, as many states have balanced budget requirements, requires a collaborative effort. And I don't think, though, collaboration starts where you start to be asked to compromise core principles and values. There's a lot of things that I can work with, but there are certain things that I won't. And of course, when it's constitutionally mandated, that's the beauty of it. Nobody can argue that point. So, yeah, I would be willing to, as long as I'm not asked to compromise my core values.
Excellent, thank you.
Ken?
Do you support the fair tax or consumption tax or some other alternative plan to what's in place now?
Well, fair tax is basically a national sales tax. John Linder and Neil Boyce wrote that book on the fair tax, which I think is probably, if anybody wants to get a great education, I know it was published, I think, in 2005. It's an excellent book on fair tax. I think it's never been implemented, so, there's always laws of unintended consequences. At least that's what I've learned in business. Something looks great until you do it, but in light of the progressive and confiscatory and punitive income tax that we experience, it can't be any worse, and it certainly can be a lot better, and I think it is. I mean, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek there. I think it would be much better than an entire federal agency to administer the kind of tax policy that we have now that really punishes success and rewards failure and encourages a play toward the middle. So I would be in favor of almost anything over what we have. And I mean, there are worse scenarios, but given the ones you just described, a flat tax, of course, I think would be preferential to what we've got. Probably end up more with some kind of hybrid that is a predictable tax policy that people can plan around and live with. I mean, you obviously need revenue, but a progressive income tax, has proven itself. The creep, of marginal rates, and it's a nightmare. I know, like all of you, I live with it. So I think I would favor some combination of those, most likely.
Thank you. Once again, we're almost finished here, so I want to thank you again for
I'm having fun.
participating. Oh, yeah, I'm sure you are, that's good. I have some additional questions, and we always have to get around to the financial aspects of all of our candidates for the simple reason that we need to know the financial aspects so that we don't have any surprises after our candidates get into office, of course. So I've got some quick questions for you.
Okay.
Have you ever had any license revoked or not renewed for cause, or been the subject of professional discipline, or cited for breach of ethics, professional conduct by a bar association, disciplinary committee, court, administrative agency, or other professional group, or have you been expelled from any organization, and if so, please explain.
Wow. No, nothing. I'm not a lawyer, thankfully, so I can't be saddled with anything relative to that. I've not been expelled from any organization, even the Cub Scouts. I got in trouble one time for putting soap in the city fountain when I was 18 on a football team.
Well, those things at 18 are very
Yeah,
important.
other than that, I think you could Google me and you'd be bored to death, so.
Have you or has any organization or business under your control ever declared bankruptcy or been sued, currently facing any liens or other financial issues?
No.
Okay, have you ever been arrested or convicted for any crime excluding minor traffic offenses?
Glad you threw that exclusion in.
Or did I-
I haven't gotten a traffic ticket in about 20 years, but I have gotten traffic tickets. No, I haven't, to answer your
Okay.
question in all seriousness.
Please describe one instance in which you faced an ethical dilemma and how you resolved it.
Oh, wow, that's a good question. Well, probably the most recent experience in my life, in around 2006, I partnered with a individual and made some property investments. Did that in order to try to, because I don't have, retirement income or anything like that. The companies I've been with, it's been all like most Americans, 401k and savings plans. So I took some of my sales bonuses and went into buying a condominium, one in particular in Hilton Head. And we formed an LLC to buy it under that LLC. And to make a long story short, 2007 happened. And I had a property that went from being with a mortgage of about $700,000 and valued at $850,000 to a property with a $700,000 mortgage valued at about $490,000. And we found ourselves, the plan was not to keep it for 20 years, the plan was to keep it for 5 to 10. We made significant improvements in it, and the individual that I was involved in this with basically went into bankruptcy and left me with the entire responsibility, the whole nut. He and I have an agreement between us. He's a great guy, nothing against him, but he just couldn't keep it. He was a lot more exposed, and so I had this situation. I went to 5, 6 people, and I asked them, people I respect tremendously, and I asked them for advice after 3 or 4 years of being stretched to my financial end in it. And I didn't see any improvement in the market. I didn't know what to do exactly, like a lot of people in that situation. And the advice I got was to walk away from it. And it had to be one of the most difficult decisions, but my wife and I believed that when we bought the property, we were putting capital at risk, and if we benefited, if the market had continued to go up like it had the previous 25 years, without fail, then we would have gotten tremendous benefit. I wouldn't have shared that with the bank. I wasn't willing to give the bank any of my profits. I would have paid them off and sold the condo and walked away clearing, some profit. So when it went the other direction, I really felt like I couldn't live with the idea of walking away from it. Now that it didn't work, I was going to let them share all the risk. And so we dipped into our retirement and took a good portion of it and paid off the difference and got out of it, but got out of it at a tremendous loss. That was not what everybody was doing. That was the advice. 4 of the 5 people told me to walk away. One guy said, you need to, I believe, the book Proverbs says that a man keeps his word to his own hurt, meaning even when it's not to my benefit, I do what I need to do. And that's the principle we operated by. I don't know that it's all that great altruistic. I think that's what most people would do, but a lot of people during that period just walk away from stuff. We chose not to.
Okay, thank you very much. A couple more questions. Are you currently connected to any outstanding unpaid taxes in any way?
I hope not. I have a trailer in Montana that my daughter is carrying a horse around in, but I think I paid tag tax on that,
Okay,
so I think I'm okay.
okay, great. This is your opportunity now. Is there anything else that voters should know about you that we have not addressed?
Man, I don't know. You addressed just about the things I didn't even think to address, so this has been a great great interview process. It's great for candidates too, because it makes you really, if you haven't thought about some of these things, you need to. I would say that, you know, the one question that you didn't, but we touched on in a lot of different ways is, you know, kind of what's the requirement of a leader. And I really think that there are really 3 or 4 things that you look for. You look for competency, you look for life experience, which kind of plays into competency. And you look for advocacy, somebody who won't just say, yeah, me too, but will say, that's something that I feel strongly about, and I'm actually going to advocate for it. I think that's part of what we haven't had. And now, I don't mean locally, but I'm talking more nationally. We've had a lot of people who say me too, but aren't advocating for it. And I think because sometimes advocating has its cost. We've seen people advocate for it, and they've been labeled by the press as all kinds of things. They've been filibusters and been called obstructionists, and their motives have been questioned and all that sort of thing. So I think you need somebody who's an advocate and somebody who has a degree of integrity that has lived and has a history of living what they claim. And I am far from perfect. My kids will tell you that. I used to think I would do parenting seminars until they grew up old enough to teach me otherwise. Now I feel like I need a parenting seminar. But they're all grown up now, so thankfully, by God's grace, they're doing well. But the point is, I think that those 4 kind of qualities are key. And the reason they're key is, the last one being integrity, is because we could sit here all day and talk about the issues, any one particular issue. Half of them weren't even on the table 10 years ago. And there's going to be a whole bunch more that are going to come onto the table in the next 5 years, I hate to say it. But there are, and I'm afraid where those issues are going to take us. And so, not being able to know what all those issues are yet, I want to be able to vote for someone who will, with competency, with integrity, with advocacy, who will take a position based on the principles that they claim in a campaign that are consistent with who they are and what they'll do going forward in terms of representation. So I think those are key qualities in leadership, and some of those things just aren't known until somebody's lived long enough and you've seen it played out in their personal life and their business life and in their public life. I think with some failures, for sure, most of which nobody will ever know because they're personal, but I don't claim to be perfect, but I think that I fit that bill for the most part, and I would very much like to be considered, and I'd like the vote of all those in my district to represent them. And that would be all I would add.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you